Hello, everybody. Welcome, 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 welcome in that order. Get settled, get comfortable. Happy Monday.
Mr. Burnham, what a surprise.
Joey.
Love it when Burnham joins us.
Me too. I don't see you enough, Jason.
I know. How you guys doing? Hey, Denise.
Hey, and what a great quote, Jason. Thank you so much. I love that.
Thank you.
You'll be hearing from his lawyers soon.
Right.
Everything's open source. It's all open source, especially for Denise.
Yeah. No, I think it's only fair. I was going to say that upper humanism can go to Burnham, but then I've got a feeling he'll probably go, "Nah, I don't want it."
I love that, upper humanism. And actually, Tom, I'm sorry, not Tom, Joseph, I wanted to ask you, you had said something right after you introduced the word, and you said it was this strategic something. I can't remember. You were describing the term, and you also said misplaced messaging, and it was a combination of misplaced messaging and this telegraph selling stuff or something like that you were talking about the gap. I'm totally misquoting you, but I wanted you to say it again because it was so good.
So I said, okay, I'll read it to you. I said, when misplaced messaging meets a telegraphed way to sell more stuff, the combination is explosive. And then I said the discussion inspired me to coin a new phrase, opportunism, defined as opportunism with soul. No one begrudges companies the right to earn money. And whilst we can always be a little cynical and question the motives, there's a world of difference between a Nike and a Gap Unite message. Culture is a great cipher of intent, purpose is another. So I think the point I also wanted to make there was it's okay. Like I always used to say, the great proxy of product placement was when you go like, did they pay for that? Like that just seems too perfect. It's almost like it leaves you guessing. And in this case, my little proxy is the ability to say, you can maybe wonder if it was a bit of a PR ploy, but they have the credibility and they have that goodwill that allows them to actually straddle in this particular case, to make a little bit of money, maybe a quick buck, but they have so much capital in terms of goodwill that you give them the rope.
Yeah, and I think that's the question is like, I don't think Gap has that capital. I don't think that maybe to your point, 10, 20 years ago, they might have, but today, not so much.
All right, so I feel I have to give Mr. Tom Morris the conch only because he introduced me to Denise.
I love today's session so much. Denise, thank you so much. You know, Joseph, I don't know if I told you, but Denise, you came to my attention a long time ago. Well, it couldn't be that long. You're so young. But it was many years ago. I saw Denise kind of rising from the landscape of fairly wise voices, and clearly she was a very wise voice. And so I've sort of charted Denise through the years, and I've read articles that she's written, and I've always thought, wow, that's a good insight. Boy, that's a good way of putting it. So Denise, I got involved in this, and Joseph, I just looked it up. It was July 21st. July 21st, I was a guest, and I didn't know anything about what Joseph did. He didn't know anything about what I did, but a famous Speakers Bureau agent kind of connected us and said, Tom, you should be on Joseph's show. Joseph, you should have Tom. And I just fell in love with the idea right away of what Joseph's trying to accomplish with people. And it was just this wonderful community. So what? I've missed about 2 or 3 days on the after show since July 21st. I mean, it's amazing how I have to chase away the hordes of people wanting me to do other things so I can be here every afternoon. Not really.
Wow.
But thank you so much for being a part of this show. I mean, I got so excited. Joseph knows I take notes. And when I get excited, It gets red and then it gets yellow and so then it goes to the other side of the notes. And so, yeah, a lot to think about.
That's awesome. Well, You'll have to share your notes because I want to make sure that I said things that were good.
You did. Oh, you did.
Okay.
Oh, and some of the stuff about purpose and operationalizing purpose. It's interesting that we started with the seated soliloquy about buzzwords, a new buzzword. Purpose has been a buzzword for 10 years now, and nobody seems to even scratch the surface as to what purpose really means. There was one book written about it years ago that a lot of people have recommended to me, and I went and read the book, and I said to my wife, this is the biggest intellectual mess I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've seen many intellectual messes in my life, but it just goes to show a book can be very popular about an idea that seems to capture people's attention and that seems to be a lightning rod for all kinds of things without anybody being able to say exactly, okay, what is this? And how do you operationalize it? So thanks for what you said about that today. Good stuff.
Thank you.
You've just left us all with so much to ponder. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I was going to say, how does this work? This is my first time in an after show. So this is very cool.
So this is very interesting to me because that might have been the most beautiful 1 second of silence we've ever had on this after show, where everyone's being polite, etc. The way it typically works is there are no rules. We have a little bit of fun. We move around the room. Typically, people will ask questions of the guest, or sometimes I might. I think my goal is generally to speak, to kind of use the Mike Tyson term, to fade into Bolivian, and that's my favorite line. But now I've been so happy with the whole crematorium and funeral and cemetery, industry association. I never got that gig, but you know what?
And
and I just have to. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say we always enjoy talking to the guest in the after show. Joseph enjoys quoting one of his previous books. I like to show the cover of one of my books. Stephen, you can see on the screen, likes to eat something. Joey just looks so wise. And Jan and Seth, they have this, like there's so much going on in their heads that you don't know when it's going to explode. And Jason already has impressed us with that quote that we're all writing down and hoping to get credit for. So, I mean, we've already paid the price.
And then I mute Tom every now and then when I feel like he's overstepped. So he's unmuted again. He knows the mute is only out of love. But in all seriousness, does anyone have a question, a comment about anything we've discussed today, or that you want to maybe a new topic, etc. While I fix my green screen?
Denise, thank you. It was just a great talk, and the things that you stand for, I think, they really touch us. Not just intellectually, but emotionally. And it's rewarding because I think branding people, marketing people have always known that the emotional side is really important, or if not the most important thing. But it's really hard to create evidence for that emotion making a board of directors money, which seems to be their number one purpose. And my question is, how do you go beyond preaching to the choir so that boards of directors that we've all been in front of, or even top management, CROs, CFOs come to mind, truly understand the revenue connection to them? Do you think that's happening now because of COVID and a woke kind of moment we're in? Or do you think that we're still preaching to the choir and without some type of real serious, like I wrote in a comment, some serious ROI index that's endorsed by a real financial person, it's still going to be a marketing echo chamber?
Yeah, I like to be optimistic or cautiously optimistic. And to your point, I do think that one of the silver linings of the pandemic is this awakening generally among business leaders that their customers need to be engaged in a way that addresses their emotional needs as much as their kind of transactional needs, and that employees specifically need to be engaged with so much care and deliberation and specificity to make sure that the experience that we're creating for our employees really inspires and equips and enables them to deliver great customer experiences and to feel safe and comfortable and excited and motivated about their work. And so I am optimistic that this kind of awakening will continue on. And I think that part of my optimism comes from the fact that we as consumers and as kind of general society and as media are going to be holding our leaders more and more accountable for these things. I think that what we've seen over the last 6-9 months is greater scrutiny of the way that companies have been operating and a higher level expectation of what we expect these leaders to do. And I think that's only going to continue. So I do think we're on an upward trend, but I also very much like your idea, Jan, of some sort of, one metric, like we need an NPS for this because, sometimes it's just having that kind of quantifiable, trackable metric that can really just kind of bring the attention that it needs.
There is one important, it was almost the elephant in the room that I forgot to mention, and I should have, but I'll do it in this particular case, which is there is still an acute lack of diversity on boards of the Fortune 500 and companies, or even Global 2000 companies. And so your point, it's a build on top of what you said. One is to think about, not just the legacy past, but the future legacy of these boards that have seen and lived through all of this change, especially, don't even bring the CMO, the revolving door of CMOs. But in addition, as boards do become hopefully more diverse and more representative of, of consumers and employees that work for them and that they serve, I think that's going to speak even that it's going to help the situation and continue to evolve, certainly.
A good point, Joe.
Yeah.
I think most corporate boards look like this screen, right? And that's the problem. So, yeah, I love what you said today. Thank you for joining us on the show. And Jan, by the way, you look like the most interesting man in the world. I just dig this no look you got going on with that. That's perfect. I don't know if you've ever seen that's my favorite commercial, but you're there, dude. Good for you. So yeah, I've been involved in this for many years. When I had left the ad biz about 3 years ago, but while I was in it, my partners and I shot a documentary called The Naked Brand, and this was in 2012. And we got really into the concept of, is social media and social technology going to allow brands for the first time to have to be transparent and be authentic and be empathetic with their messaging? And so that all came across. We did all this really cool research. We interviewed, CEOs from across the world, neuroscientists, journalists, academics, and we all came up with this thesis, which was exactly this. We need to be more empathetic. We need to be transparent. We need to be authentic. And I think that's kind of, per Joseph's mention in the beginning, that's where Gap fell down, because they weren't authentic to who they were. And it was like, I worked for a company called Ecosphere, which was a company that was trying to connect sustainable brands to conscious consumers. And I helped them build their ad platform for a couple of years. And the problem they called it was greenwashing at the time. So if a company came out and said they were doing great stuff, but it really didn't have a lot of connectivity to who they were just greenwashing for the purpose of marketing. And I still think that's what companies are doing today, in that they want to be part of this revolution around being woke, but they really don't, it isn't who they are, right? So if Gap is trying to say, hey, we want to be, not only, again, it was just so tone deaf on so many fronts, but the idea that it just didn't work because it wasn't authentic, right? And I think that's where this, I don't want to be like a naysayer, but I hope it's happening, but I thought it was happening because I was drinking the Kool-Aid in 2011, 2012. And when you meet with guys like Yvonne Chouinard from Patagonia and Tony Hsieh from Zappos, and we had all these really cool interviews, you get it like surrounded by all of this wonderful energy. And then if anything, it got worse since then. Mm-hmm. Corporate transparency got worse. Corporate excess got worse. The salaries got bigger. The boards got more white. They got more mail. It's just, that stuff drives me crazy. So I'm just happy to hear what you're doing, and I do hope that this new revolution that we're seeing in the world of corporate marketing does take place. We do get more diversity. We have more women, more people of color. I mean, it's time. It's about time, and I hope it happens. I really do.
Yeah, Joey, I'm so glad that you use the word authenticity, because to me, that's really what this brand culture fusion is all about. It's about saying, hey, it can't just be a message. It just can't be, you can't be a facade. This has to be something you truly believe and you actually live. So absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more.
And people wonder, it's funny how business gets blamed for most of the ills of the world. It's the greed of business that's corrupted politics. It's the greed of business that's polluted the environment. It's business that's created the greed of business again, that's created the great gap between people. With business being the scapegoat of pretty much every human problem, why would it be, people are asking the question, how could it be that business is suddenly becoming conscious about the things that really matter? And I first got to know the TV producer Norman Lear about 30 years ago, and I remember him quoting some early 20th century figure about the danger of the breakup of all the great ancestral human institutions. And when we think about the troubles that all our institutions have had, let's think outside politics, the church, the synagogue, the educational institutions, community organizations, Rotary and Kiwanis, and the role that community plays in people's lives. When we start to have trouble in all our institutions, it's almost like I see some business people stepping up and finally realizing the true power they have to fill some of this void and to mirror and model some of the things the other institutions have been talking about but haven't been able to accomplish. So that makes me hopeful this is not just another illusion or a false start, because I've experienced exactly what Joey's experienced. I've had this opportunity to speak to so many Fortune 500 companies and their leadership teams. And sometimes you hear amazing things, and then later on you say, where did that go? What happened to that initiative and enthusiasm and all that? And so, with enough false starts, it's almost like, are we finally in a time where we come to realize? And that's why I've often said the worse things get, the more of an optimist I become, because people can tolerate unbelievably bad stuff. But when things become literally intolerable culturally, that's a wake-up call for a lot of people. And that's what I hope we're seeing now.
I think we might have just found another quote. The worse things get, the more optimistic I become. I love that.
Actually, there is another quote. Was change occurs when the pain of holding on becomes greater than the fear of letting go?
Absolutely. It's that pendulum swing through history, right? You see it, and Hegel thought it was this big insight about all of human existence. And whether he was right or not, we do see the pendulum swing throughout human existence. Things get really extreme in one way, and then there's a swing back. So, and I see that in a lot of young people now.
Change happens when the pain of not changing is greater than the pain of changing.
Yeah.
That's my favorite one, because it helps people understand that it's a painful process either way. So you've got to, and then of course I get into a bit of S&M, which is, if you really are, no, seriously, if you are a masochist, then that's awesome. Most people are not, i.e. an entrepreneur. This is the shtick. This is the shtick. You know the drill, Burnham.
Who knew on the show we'd go from talking about death to S&M? It's like
anything goes here on CoronaTV.
We call that Mondays here on CoronaTV.
Okay.
Well, Denise, part of the strategically, when I thought about just how I wanted to execute the show, part of the thinking was our lives are so manic depressive now because of being at home and having joy with our family, but then seeing the death on the it's just the swings are quite hectic and extreme. And so I felt the show should mirror that, where we can go from emotional and intense and passionate and serious to just completely wacky, and then back again.
I love it. Yes. does. Well, I've definitely gotten more laughs in the show than I usually do in a workday. So thank you.
Good. Can I ask Denise, how did you start doing this, Denise? I mean, you know, I know a lot of people's backstories, and even the guests that we've had on the show, they worked their way up to CMO here, and then they did this and then did that. How did you decide to? How did you get interested in all this, and how did you become the person you are today, doing what you do, spreading wisdom about these things?
Well, I'll give you one piece of it, and that is my last corporate job, which was 16 plus years ago, was with Sony Electronics. And I was hired to be their first ever brand manager, kind of start up their brand office. And in that role, both the president and the CMO had the foresight to say, you know what, the first thing we want you to work on is not some big branding campaign, but it is to, within our organization, ensure that we share one common understanding of what our brand stands for and, you know, how we need to evolve and interpret and reinforce it going forward. So from that moment, I really became much more interested in how, like the internal engagement and alignment and operationalization of brand. And so when I ended up resigning my post from Sony and starting out on my own, that was the focus of my consulting work, which ended up kind of being the focus of my books and then now my speaking. But, you know, it makes so much sense, but it's so different from the way most people would have thought about brand building back then and even now.
Yeah, I ask it because when Joseph put up the 7 principles from one of your books, and I saw each one of these, and rarely do I see a list of things where I say yes to every single thing. But that's what I did today. And I noticed that some of the things, like the, you know, not buying into trends, ignoring trends, that you were kind of doing that yourself as you constructed some of the principles, right? Because there are some of the things were not counterintuitive, but counter what you were hearing in the world about what companies should be doing. And then once I saw how you stated it, it's like, oh, wow, that's so true. And so that kind of explains it to me, how you got from there to here, right? So that's good. That's very good.
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes back to what Joey was talking about before, that I think that there's this kind of traditional notion of how you build a brand is you like go out and you create these messages, you create advertising, you say a bunch of stuff. And, based on all my experience, I learned that no, the way you build your brand is you take your brand and you make that what you do and how you do it. You make it a filter for everything your organization does. And so that's why I ended up writing What Great Brands Do, because I kind of felt like most people want to know how do you build a great brand, but most folks go about doing it the wrong way. And then the same thing happened with Fusion, this integration of brand and culture. I felt like there was so much out there about culture, but it wasn't really tied to, the brand and what the organization was trying to do as a business. And so I wanted to kind of dispel some of the myths and share my insights about building a culture and a brand that are so tightly and integrated and aligned that there's no daylight between the two of them.
That's great. That's very good.
But I think that's also where Yohn did it well, because when he started his company, he actually told us in his interview that he started a business so that he could have a soapbox to go out and preach environmentalism. I mean, that was the purpose of his business as a rock climber and as an outdoorsman. And so the idea that, he allows his staff to go surfing in high tide is also part of the culture, right? So everyone bails out of the office during high tide and they come back and they work their ass off when they get back home. And I think that was kind of what we learned from this research, was that it is authenticity, because that's who he was. He wasn't trying to be an environmentalist because he thought it would actually get him sales. It was, this is who I am, this is what I want to do. And I think I have yet to see that permeate into a lot of corporate culture. I think everyone's trying to jump on a bandwagon, whether it's woke or whether it has something to do with environmentalism, or specifically when you get, BP coming up with their environmental campaign. That kind of stuff just drove me crazy. So it was, I think that's kind of where people have to just be themselves. And that's not just in corporate America. That's just even the people that are there. If you go to a company, I grew up in the agency world, and every agency has its own culture. And you can either immerse yourself in it because you love it, or you leave because you don't. It's not something where
they're all toxic. They're just different. They're just different pellets,
Totally.
different Pantones
Totally.
on the toxic. We have ultra toxic. We have toxic light.
We have that word in the resume, agency experience required. It doesn't mean that you've been to an agency. It means that you have nothing else more important than your job. And that if you're going to come here, you're going to work all the time. And if you don't like it, you're free to leave. So that's it. Oh, you have family. That's really cute. Good luck.
So,
but yeah.
So I have just a quick reflection, just a little build, which I think you're going to love, Denise. And then just a quick question in the time we have left. So the build is, first of all, I think two very, very original, powerful reflections and takeaways from today. One was this idea of unification of all of these brand, touch points or messaging points or even strategic points, right? This idea of purpose must lead, right? And they all should be aligned. The second thing is, so the build is on the board thing. And it struck me, Denise, a board is like a grandparent. So, and what I mean by that is that, you pick up the baby and you have this amazing time, and then the baby, poops in its pants, and you give the baby right back to the parent saying, I'm out of here. And I was thinking, like, there's something like really kind of, it's interesting how the question of the day was about what we tell your grandkids, but there's something about the love that a grandparent has for their grandkids, and also the relationship with almost a bit of a confrontational relationship with respect to a parent. But I think there's something interesting there about the board versus the C-suite, the grandparent versus the parent, being a little bit removed, and being able to be a little bit more objective on some fronts, and then a little bit more detached on others that make it work.
And something.
Yeah, and
go ahead, Denise.
Please go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say that one of the things I wrote in that article on Forbes was that apparently, and again, I don't know enough about the investment world, so I have to rely on my research of what other people are saying is going on. But the boards are being asked more explicitly by asset managers and by investors, individual investors, to enforce more accountability on culture, on purpose, on values. And so we're seeing kind of the grandparents being held accountable by other people in the family, where they can't just give the baby back and be like, oh, okay, fine, we did what we could, but rather they're being held to a new level, a new standard. And so if we see that increase, I think that's when some of the sea change that needs to happen will happen.
Yeah, I actually find the biggest aha moment is when companies, when you start to communicate to them and show them that you have your mission, you have your vision, you have your values, but unless employees know how to bring that to life within their roles and functions, it's just words on a wall. And usually that's where you find the biggest aha moments, where they're realizing, like, wow, we invest all this money in building our identity, but what's your identity if you're not living it?
Yeah, definitely. And to me,
so
there's a deep philosophical concept that has unified everything on this show today. And I don't know if it's been named yet. And by giving it this build up, you're probably going to expect a lot more than I can come up with, because it's a very simple word and it's a very common word, and it's very deep in at least many of the world's philosophies. It's the concept of harmony. What Denise was talking about is the harmony of brand and culture. We're talking about now the harmony of boards and management. We're talking about harmony at a lot of different levels as a source of great power. And until purpose is aligned with everything else, or everything else is aligned with purpose, we should possibly say, you won't have the harmony that produces the power that purpose always promises, but so often won't deliver because it's not been operationalized properly.
Yep.
I think that's a great word. Great way to end.
That's Denise's way of saying to you, like, I'm out of here. No, I'm kidding.
Oh no, I'm just saying I have nothing to add. I wish
you're part of the family now, which is this is what happens when we get so comfortable with one another. But
I think Denise actually has to bring the cookies to the next after show.
I can do that.
Well, we have a supplier for the cookies, our friend Kuda Bisa at Nunbelievable, which is a mission-based company, chocolate chip cookies and helping feed the food insecure.
Wow.
But Tom, I will give you I will give us an extra minute or two just to wrap up. Harmony is not, Denise, I always point out after doing 140 of these interviews, give or take, that when something is different, it just stands out and it's clear. There are a lot of people that say the same thing, and that's fine, but it's very hard sometimes to find original thought and thinking. Like today, this idea about this unification of behind and into and through purpose, and also the board inside and many others. But I think Tom bringing up the word harmony, that's not a word that I think has ever been used in all of these interviews with all of these keynote speakers and C-suite and Mark Pritchards and the works. Harmony is interesting. We talk about balance, maybe we talk about equilibrium, we talk about other things. We talk about, I don't know, integration. There are all these ugly words, but harmony is a beautiful word. That and Burnham, there's something there about words on a wall. I don't know if it's a new startup or consultancy, but because it's an ironic one. But words on a wall is another great thought. So I'm going to steal words on a wall. I'm going to give you humanism, and Denise has got the other quote.
I think it was not just words on the wall.
Not just right.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, that helps me because I was like, I like the idea of words on a wall. Can I help you? But now it's not just words on a wall.
Or you could use it sarcastically. Words on the wall.
See, if Denise and Jason will just come back often enough, the rest of us can get our next books written really easily. This is easy. I'm going to take these notes and turn them into gold.
All right. Jan, would you like to tell people about tomorrow's guest, Mr. Dr. Rourke?
Yeah, it's an amazing story that I just came across, and it's of a pilot who grew a little bit tired of his usual work. He happened to be a pilot, but he got a little tired of his usual work, and he wanted in his day-to-day life, he wanted to adopt a dog, a pet, and there weren't any available in his area. And he looked into why that was the case, and he found out that a lot of these pets were in areas of the country where there were too many, and not enough people to foster them, and so they were being destroyed. Whereas in areas like he was at, far west, people couldn't get a pet at all. So he said, "Well, I'm a pilot. Let me see what I can do," and he started this company called Dog is My Co-Pilot. And he literally just got in his plane and he went to places like New York and, populous places that had too many dogs and pets, put them on his plane and took them back to places that didn't have any pets. And thereby not just saved these animals, but gave, just love and joy to these people who wanted pets.
That's great.
So Jan reached out, he said, you should have him on the show. I said, well, normally I would say, well, you get him on the show. Did you actually reach out, or did I in this case? I think I did, but
no, you didn't.
Did you? You made the intro?
Yeah, because you asked me to.
That's what I wasn't sure. That's why I said I wasn't sure in this case.
Yeah, you're officially now my booking agent. Go and get him.
Joseph, you did it by delegation, which is what you're learning to do more and more.
I think what I'm trying to say is thank you, but it's not. It's coming out with different words.
No, I think Denise would love the story if she just even just looks it up and isn't able to attend the show.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Well, he's coming in tomorrow, and so guys, have a fantastic Monday. We're still here. Unfortunately, Mark Esper is not. But I've tried to stay relatively political free today. I'm getting it out of my system. It's very cathartic.
That's very that's very good of you.
I'm getting better, Stephen. I'm getting better. Like, I'm trying to live by my new code on Facebook now, which is I'm not going to comment on somebody else's feed unless it's snarky and it's my same worldview. That's my new caveat. But I'm really just trying now not to get involved in any negative. And in fact, there's one guy who funnily enough, called me out then. He called me out based on my post about, about healing, etc. He said, so let me understand, if Trump is successful in his, 58 lawsuits, will you still promote, will you still say that it's time for us to heal and come up with this commitment and etc., which obviously I wouldn't. So we ended up with a backwards and forwards. So now I've reached out to him, and I think he's someone that we know in the industry, Joey. I'll have to text you about him. Well, I'll stop the recording, and then, I mean, it's all good.